Y'all, this past week, we've seen literally dozens of teasers, and almost all of them are probably gonna help Wizard101 grow. Today, we're gonna be talking about the one thing that I've seen that I honestly think is probably gonna hurt the game. The topic of today's video are the new auras that are coming into Wizard101. In case you've been living under a rock, I'm gonna go through them super rapid fire and talk about why I have some pretty big issues with them. So we got Cosmic Charge, which is basically like a slightly better infal. It gives you 20 universal pierce. And on the opposite, we got Stabilize, which seems like a better brace, which adds 25% resist to you for 4 rounds. Now, these are the only 2 positive auras we've been teased. The remaining 3 are harmful auras that you can put on your opponent. We got Attenuate, which is basically like a plus 20% trap for 4 rounds on your opponent, but it's an aura. We got Pathogen, which is basically like a 50% infection on your opponent for 4 rounds, but it's an aura. And we've got Starfall, which is like having a 15% weakness on your opponent for 4 rounds, but it's an aura. Now, right away, it is really cool that they're adding harmful auras into the game. That's one thing I want to get right out there. The only harmful aura that they've bothered to experiment with up to this point has been Bunyip. And while this is a very cool spell, I don't really see, just simply off of the accuracy alone, I don't really see anyone but a Storm using it or risking a very high chance of fizzle. So for the first time ever, we're gonna have accessible harmful auras that you can put on your opponent. So on the surface, pretty cool, right? We have access to a new mechanic. How could that possibly be bad? Well, my issues with these auras are twofold. One, I do not see a single soul using these in PvE whatsoever. None of these auras are good for damage output other than the one that basically increases the incoming damage of your opponent. But all harmful auras are only best suited for 1v1 situations, and I feel like PvE is really AoE centered. I think it's crazy to me that we don't have even if it has to be PvP banned because it's OP. It's crazy to me that we don't have new and improved auras so that we can increase our damage output in PvE. That's already, in my opinion, the biggest issue I have. Besides the relative uselessness of the spells in PvE from a practical point, I think we really need to talk about the new rules that they're establishing with the new positive and negative auras. So if y'all don't know, right now in live realm, let's say someone had a brace, so that's like a positive aura for them, and let's say that they healed. What Bunyips would do is it would do the 700 damage that you see, and then it would clear the heal and do a minus 25% aura if it's 1 heal for healing on the opponent, and if it's 2 heals, like I don't know, if they do like a berry surprise or something, this would do the same amount of damage, but it would clear both heals and it would be a minus 50% negative healing aura. Well, that part is really cool. What about the brace, you might ask? Right now, I think the way it's supposed to work in live realm, not sure how easy it works because it's kind of bugged. It's supposed to stack with the brace, meaning, right, let's say that you had a minus 50 like infection aura on you. Someone who wants to keep healing isn't just able to like throw on another aura and then heal without having, you know, a debuff on them. If they were to do something like an aura over it, both auras are at play. That's how it works in live realm right now. Now, when these teasers came out, they came out with additional information saying the mechanics are going to change, and that if you want to cancel out an aura, all you have to do is cast an aura over it. So let's say that a Storm were to Galvanic, and someone who wants to play super defensively doesn't want the Galvanic out. Instead of bracing like they do right now, which is basically a net output, like pretty neutral, what they could do is they could use the new Starfall spell, cancel out the Galvanic, and put a weakness on their opponent. So the net of those 2 moves has gone from pretty neutral to literally just being the bad for the person that basically aura'd first. And this idea of something being bad for the person that takes the first action is already something we see in this game. We see this in PvP anyways. We see this with people that bubble first, right? If someone has the same number of bubbles as you and you bubble first, statistically, let's say you both pull bubbles, you will lose the bubble war. I think everyone has seen this, right? There will be a ping pong of bubbles until somebody has the bubble forever, and they will have a much better chance of winning unless it's a very uneven matchup like balance versus like ice or balance versus death. In most matchups, if you start the bubble, you're statistically putting yourself at a disadvantage to win the bubble, and therefore you're gonna lose the game. Oversimplification, sure, because there is deck RNG, but now auras are gonna work in the exact same way. If you see someone with a positive aura, your response now is to put a negative aura on them. And if someone puts a negative aura on you, your response needs to be to put a positive aura on yourself. What I think is even more concerning is the bubbling issue has already become such a problem that they've already had to cap the number of like 2-pip bubbles you can pack. TC Dark Winds, for example, they're not allowed in PvP. No matter what deck you use, no matter how many copy limits it gives, if y'all didn't know this, I'm sure this is like common knowledge now, you can't put more than than 4 Dark Winds in. Are they gonna do this with auras, or are we just gonna see a potentially endless ping pong of auras that's completely determined by how many auras someone's gonna pack? What's crazy is, right, let's say that they were to go out of their way to make auras no PvP in side deck. That still doesn't stop someone who wants to only Jade or play defensively or stall out a game. It doesn't stop them from packing 4 Fortifies, 4 Braces, and 4 of the new defensive auras. The game already gets a little monotonous and annoying when you have to bubble fight and just literally out copy limit your opponent. Now they're adding basically another thing that follows that exact same mechanic. I'm gonna say this, and maybe this is like, you know, a hot take because I feel like this is like a broad argument, but I feel like whenever a strategy comes down to having more copies of something, it doesn't have anything to do with skill at all anymore. If it's just about having more copies of one thing over another, it's just about getting a decently favorable matchup, discarding hard, and just spamming single effects repeatedly. There's no real response to your opponent. We've had a lot of strategies like this, right? We've seen people that Jade and literally only play defense and healing till their opponent flees out of frustration. A little bit ago, before that, we've also seen Darkmoor decks, which don't have any copy limits, where people just spammed threefold Fever, and that's all their strategy was. All they had to do was spam threefolds, and there was nothing that anyone could do about it if they didn't have enough copies of weakness counters in their deck. Before a lot of these anti-blades and anti-traps came out, even before all of that, we saw a serious problem with people just spamming blades and traps and hoping that their opponent just didn't pack enough counters to blades and traps. With all the things that you can spam in the game, we've seen what happens when it's just about having enough copies of something. While I don't mind that they're adding auras, I don't really see, if they're not going to help PvE and they're gonna hurt PvP, I don't really see the point of them. I really hate criticizing this update because it does seem like such a good update. Like, a lot of things actually really do excite me. But I hate to say this, when you're looking at things like the Triton change, you're looking at the Snowdrift ban, you're looking at all the other ways that healing counters are nerfed. What I'm not a fan of, after all of those, is yet another tool in the favor of someone that doesn't want to advance the state of the game, right? If someone just wants to turtle up and do nothing, this new aura change is a perfect way for them to do it. And even for legitimate players, this is just more of a nuisance than, like, you know, out strategizing your opponent. I think there's 2 solutions to this. One, they'll have to look at copy limits for auras. They'll have to look at the role of auras inside that. If they rolled this out without doing that, it's a disaster on release. Beyond that, I also think that, let's say that a meta is full of auras. Right now, it does seem like there's supposed to be 3 schools that, you know, interact with auras. I don't really think they've fleshed this identity out, but if y'all didn't know this, Ice, Storm, and Death are supposed to be somewhat anti-aura or aura adjacent schools. I don't really know the logic behind it, but that's why, you know, there's Thieving Dragon, which basically gets rid of an aura for Ice, right? There's an aura clear for Ice, there's an aura clear for, you know, Death. Right now, with the new way that harmful auras are gonna work, technically you have a way of dealing with auras if someone's healing already naturally on a Storm. If auras are crazy and you want to go into one of those schools, you should have a clear and rewarded answer for that. I think with the way dual pierce and stuff is gonna work, I think people are gonna go into Ice and Death simply for the anti-aura, you know, potential. But I think still those spells are gonna be way better on the actual schools that they're from than for someone going into those schools to punish an aura heavy meta. I think things like, you know, like conditional clears become a lot more useful when more copies are involved, right? Clearing an aura for a single shield, that's very, very powerful. That's great on a tanky school like Ice, but like on a school like Myth, where you are probably going to want to clear the aura and leverage the shield, one shield isn't going to help you all that much. It's the same with Monster Mash. Let's say that I want to, like, you know, clear an aura on a Storm, and I want to actually use the weaknesses that I get from clearing it, like the spell does, to do something else. It's pretty damn hard to justify going all in on Death when it's just one weakness I'm getting. The issue is in both directions. One, there is no current limit on how many auras you can pack or how you can spam them, and the actual counters to auras, other than just replacing an aura, simply are not good enough regardless of what school you're on. This is something that I think is going to really affect PvP. The last thing I want is for a meta that could be good to be completely ruined by heal spamming and aura spamming. I think that would be ridiculous. So hopefully they take this feedback seriously. I don't really think anybody, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I don't think this is one of those scenarios where if you know, slow down a little bit on a part of the update, it's going to be like you're prioritizing PvP over PvE. I'd love if they took a step back, made these auras more viable in PvE, made them balanced for PvP in a way that's not monotonous. That's my hot take on this specific part of the update. I would love to hear what y'all think about the current state of auras and what they seem to be doing to them in this update. Hopefully I explained why I think it's such a big issue properly, because, you know, it's a little crazy. I look forward to reading y'all's thoughts on this. A bunch of people wanted me to talk about this, so yeah, here's me, like, you know, weighing in on what I think could be a very problematic part of this update. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. I look forward to reading all of y'all's comments. Stay awesome, and yeah.